Now, from deep in the heart of Texas, LifeTalk. Here's your host, Mark Crutcher.
Welcome to LifeTalk for November 2009. I'm Mark Crutcher, and lurking nearby are Cherie Johnson and Troy Newman. Unfortunately, Johnny is off with the flu this month and couldn't be here, but we're going to try to get him by phone later in the show. As always, of course, Father Frank and Janet Moreno will be joining us later with the Gospel of Life segment. But right now, it's time for Alan Ackles and this month's LifeTalk News. Alan?
All right, thank you, Mark. The continuing epidemic of pro-choice violence appears to be escalating rapidly. In Georgia, authorities say abortionist Daniel McBrayer got out of his vehicle at an intersection, punched a woman in the face in front of her two young children, and then drove off. Police arrested him at his office, and he was later released on $1,500 bond. In 1989, 27-year-old Catherine Pierce died of complications of an abortion performed on her by McBrayer. In Maryland, a Charles County pro-choice man is on trial accused of hiring a hitman to kill his pregnant girlfriend. Prosecutors allege that 32-year-old Charles Brandon Martin ordered the murder of 27-year-old Jody Torok because she refused to get an abortion. Prosecutors accuse Martin of hiring hitman Gerald Raymond to shoot Torok. Although she survived the attack, she is now confined to a wheelchair. Her baby was killed in the attack. In Canada, 3 pro-choice men have been sentenced to life following their involvement in the brutal murder of a 24-year-old pregnant woman. Court records show that Nathaniel Plourde pressured his girlfriend, Roxanne Fernando, to have an abortion after learning of her pregnancy. She had originally agreed, but then changed her mind. When Plourde learned of this, he lured her outside the city, claiming that he was taking her on a Valentine date. Plourde then bludgeoned her with a wrench, bound her with tape, and stuffed her into the trunk of his car. After Plourde realized the young woman was still alive, he paid 2 other men to beat her to death with a hockey stick. It was later discovered that she was still alive when they buried her in a ditch. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, another pro-choice man has also been accused of murdering his pregnant girlfriend. Friends and neighbors of Terrence Nelson and Tanya Johnson say that the two were arguing after Ms. Johnson refused Nelson's demand that she have an abortion. Authorities in Shelby County say the argument ended when Nelson shot the 36-year-old woman and her unborn child. He has now been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Well, in Indiana, police arrested a man for the murder of his girlfriend months after he made threats to kill her unborn child. According to court documents, 21-year-old Sherilyn Reyes said that her boyfriend, Bryce Webb, punched her in the stomach with a closed fist, telling her that he didn't want the baby and was going to kill it. The victim later dropped the assault charges and delivered the child, who she placed up for adoption. A month later, police found Reyes dead from a gunshot wound and charged Webb in her death. Also in the headlines is a rash of child predators who attempted to use abortion to cover up their crimes. In New York, a former church elder was sent to prison for impregnating a 16-year-old girl. 41-year-old Eddie Mijares befriended the girl's family in his congregation and began having sex with her when she was 13. She eventually became pregnant and had an abortion. In 2007, Mijares flew to Venezuela to avoid prosecution, but authorities located him and returned him to the U.S., where he is facing up to 14 years behind bars. And in a similar story, a Camden, New Jersey child predator who admitted that he molested and impregnated a teen and then forced her to have an abortion has been denied a reduction of his 74-year sentence. 35-year-old Kareem Ali Jr. was initially charged with molesting the girl dozens of times between the ages of 11 and 15 and eventually raping her. In a statement written by the victim and read in the courtroom, she described her horror at having the abortion. Under the judge's sentencing guidelines, Ali will be 97 years old before he becomes eligible for parole. Well, last month we reported that after losing some of its federal grant money, Planned Parenthood was closing 5 of its Indiana centers. But now, due to further financial pressures, Planned Parenthood is closing a 6th center in that state and cutting a total of 17 full-time and 8 part-time jobs. In addition to the Indiana closings, Planned Parenthood of Montana has announced that they are closing their Kalispell facility due to a decline in customers. Well, for the second straight year, Planned Parenthood of New York has held its annual fundraiser at the Museum of Sex. The previous events featured exhibits such as sex machines and sex life of robots, as well as a photo display documenting the Oscars of porn. Current exhibits at the museum include the sex lives of animals. Even some of Planned Parenthood's traditional supporters are expressing outrage that the organization would continue to use such an anti-woman and pornographic environment to raise money. In Washington, D.C., a political aide has been accused of intimidating a woman to have an abortion. According to court documents, Ted Loza had sex with a 26-year-old woman while on a trip to El Salvador. When she later informed Loza that she was pregnant, he arranged for her to come to D.C. on a tourist visa, where he pressured her to abort the baby. The woman testified that when she refused, Loza became upset and pushed her out of a moving car. Caving into the pressure, the woman had the abortion, and Loza's employer, D.C. Councilman Jim Graham, put the charge on his personal credit card. The woman's lawyer claims that within 2 weeks of the abortion, Loza began sexually abusing her, and she again became pregnant. The victim said that, like before, Loza reacted violently when she refused to have a second abortion, but this time she withstood the intimidation and gave birth to her baby. Afterward, a judge ordered Loza to pay $878 per month in child support. Councilman Graham is outspokenly pro-choice and has attended NARAL events in the past. And in a similar story, Kansas prison officials are facing charges that they took a prison rape victim to a Planned Parenthood abortion mill for an abortion in order to cover up the crime. The woman housed at the Topeka Correctional Facility was allegedly raped by a prison instructor and then taken by prison staff to the Planned Parenthood Center in Overland Park. Well, following up on a previous LifeTalk story, a judge in Utah has released a 17-year-old girl from jail saying that she did not commit a crime. According to the original court documents, the teenager paid 21-year-old Erin Harrison $150 to beat her so she would miscarry after her boyfriend threatened to leave her if she did not get an abortion. Harrison allegedly struck and bit her, leaving bruises on her belly and a bite mark on her neck. However, the unborn child did survive the attack. The girl and the man later confessed their scheme, but Judge Larry Steele ruled that women cannot be held criminally liable for soliciting what is, in effect, an abortion. Ironically, Harrison pleaded guilty to one count of attempted murder and is awaiting sentencing. And finally, Democrats who oppose government funding of abortion say that they will try to block the health care reform bill from coming to a vote unless Speaker Nancy Pelosi allows a floor vote on an amendment that would explicitly prohibit such funding. The amendment is being pushed by Michigan Democrat Bart Stupak, co-chairman of the House Pro-Life Caucus, and Indiana Democrat Brad Ellsworth. They are also joined in the effort by Republican Congressman Joe Pitts of Pennsylvania. I'm Alan Ackles for LifeTalk News. You can get daily news updates by logging on to ProLifeAmerica.com. Mark.
Thanks, Alan. Man, I tell you what, we had so much to talk about this month. We left out 3/4 of it, and even though this is the longest newscast we'd ever done.
Yes, all that violence.
Yeah, these people are out of control. But anyway, it was just an amazing amount of stuff. But we a couple of things before we move on I want to talk about. We lost a couple of really good people this month. To those of us who, go onto the Pro-Life America Forum, which I tell people that that's something they ought to be going to every day. You can really keep up with what's going on in the pro-life movement. One of the most beloved people on there was, his name on the thing was Yoda Vader, Doyle Chadwick from Tennessee. He was killed last Sunday in a plane crash. He was a private pilot, and he was taking some people up for a flight, and he was killed. All three of them walked away, fortunately, but we lost him. And it was one of these things when you go on the forum and you expect to see it. He's always there, right? And he's a really good guy, really nice. And even now, it's been a few days, and some of the other people on the forum, and myself included, when I go in there, it's just hard to think that he's not going to be there. You know, it's.
He was a staunch defender of the babies.
Right, he was.
Articulate and
he was at the mills every day.
Yeah.
If they were open to killing, he was there.
Yeah.
It's a sad deal. He's a good guy. We lost another good guy, Bishop Michael Saltarelli. I can never pronounce his name, but the Diocese of Wilmington died on October 12th. He was 77 years old and died from bone cancer. And he'd been a staunch pro-lifer for many years. And he was the bishop, y'all might remember, who said that Biden could never take communion at a mass or at a church under his authority, under this bishop's authority. And he's one of the guys who actually stood up and stood up for his principles. But he's gone too. But there's new ones coming along. So
a couple of heroes.
You know, one thing we have to
going.
understand, and I had to point this out to somebody on the forum. They were, you know, oh Lord, what are we going to do? We've lost this bishop, and we've lost this Yoda Vader, what's his name, off the forum, and there's other pro-lifers that are died. None of us are indispensable. I often tell people the graveyards are filled with indispensable men. You know, and God puts us all here for a certain length of time. He expects us to do our duty. We either do it or we don't. But at some point we go away, and somebody else will take our place. So.
Well, and the big point here is a man knows not his time.
Yeah,
and we could go at any moment. And so it's, you know, I tell my children, you know, you can't control where you're born, and you certainly can't control where you die, but you can control the choices that you make while you live. And we need to live every single day to the glory of God.
You know, I was talking to a African-American pastor that called me the other day about Moffat 21. Really fired up. He's arranging a large showing. He's thinking he can get several hundred, if not 1,000 people to the showing that he wants to do. Anyway, he said, we were talking about this issue of, you know, you come, you go, you know, and do you do your duty in the meantime is the big thing. He says, yeah, I have a sermon that I do on that. He said, I say it, make your dash count. Yeah. And I said, what do you mean your dash? And he says, well, you know, in your tombstone, it'll have like 1938-2010. He said, make sure in that dash is what matters. The 1938 and the 2010 don't matter. It's what did you do in your dash?